My name is Elena Vance. I'm 47 years old, and I'm the founder and CEO of Northgate Software Solutions, a logistics analytics company that closed last fiscal year at $9.2 million in revenue. My own family disowned me in October of 2013. The same season I signed the lease on my very first office for 110 square feet above a dry cleaner on Route 9 in Camden, Vermont, with only my name on the paperwork. In about 11 minutes of screen time, you're going to watch my ex-husband's new wife's face go pale in a university auditorium, and it won't have a single thing to do with me raising my voice. You'll hear a stranger at a podium say my company's name out loud before I ever get the chance to. You were never really one of us, Elena. My mother told me the night everything ended. Renee needed that money more than you needed your pride. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I read every single one of them. Let me take you back to where this actually started. I grew up in Camden, the older of two daughters, in a pale yellow farmhouse on Route 9 that smelled permanently of my mother's cedar potpourri. My sister Renee was 18 months younger, and from the time we were kids, she was the one my parents built the house around. Sometimes literally, they refinanced the mortgage twice, once in 1989 and again in 1993. To pay for her competitive gymnastics before she quit at 15 without a single regional medal to show for it. I was the responsible one, which in my family was code for the one nobody worried about, which was its own kind of loneliness. My father kept a corkboard in the hallway with Renee's ribbons pinned to it. My report cards went in a kitchen drawer. I got a partial scholarship to the University of Vermont, studied accounting, and by 26, I was a senior financial analyst at a manufacturing firm in Burlington, pulling $58,000 a year and proud of every dollar. I married Derek Whitfield in June of 2001 in a backyard ceremony under a rented white tent. We had our son, Caleb, in March of 2003. For a while, it looked like a normal life. A 3-bedroom colonial on Ashwell Street, a golden retriever named Biscuit, Sunday dinners at my parents' house where Renee's opinions were treated like scripture and mine were tolerated, politely, like background noise. The trigger came on November 23rd, 2013, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Renee's boutique, a clothing store she'd opened 2 years earlier in Montpelier, was drowning $215,000 in inventory debt she couldn't service. My parents asked me to co-sign a second loan to bail it out, using equity from Derek's and my house as collateral. I said no, not out of spite. I'd seen Renee's books unofficially because she'd once asked me to just glance at them, and the business was structurally insolvent. Co-signing wouldn't have saved her boutique. It would have cost Caleb his college fund and put my marriage's roof over our heads at risk for a debt that was already unrecoverable. I told my parents exactly that, calmly at their kitchen table, with the smell of my mother's pot roast still in the air. My father didn't yell. He just set his fork down, wiped his mouth with the same cloth napkin he'd used every Thanksgiving since I could remember, and said, "Then I don't know what to say to you anymore." My mother said the line about Renee needing the money more than I needed my pride. Renee didn't say anything at all. She just stared at her plate, and I remember thinking that was almost worse than if she'd argued with me. Derek, sitting next to me, said nothing either, which told me more than any of them did. Within a month, I was quietly excluded from the family group chat, the one they'd named Vancess Forever back in 2009. My mother returned a $75 birthday check I'd sent Renee's daughter with no note, just the check itself, torn slightly at one corner from the envelope. By Christmas, I wasn't invited, and nobody called to explain why. I didn't cry at that table. I remember feeling strangely still, almost outside my own body, like I was watching the scene from the doorway instead of sitting inside it. I finished my pot roast. I drove Caleb home through a light snow that had started while we were eating. My dignity, at least, I kept. The marriage didn't survive much longer after that. Derek and I separated in the spring of 2014 and divorced in September of 2015. He'd started seeing a woman named Paige Halloway before the ink was even dry, and they married in 2017. What got me through those years wasn't my family. It was my supervisor at the time, a woman named Harriet Okonkwo, VP of operations at the manufacturing firm, who noticed I was staying late not because I had nowhere else to be, but because the work was the one place I still felt competent. Harriet became something like the mother my mother wasn't. She loaned me the deposit for that 400 square foot office in 2013, $3,000, repaid in full by March of 2014. And she was the one who told me, build something so solid nobody gets to define you by what they took from you. Year 1, I billed $61,000 in freelance logistics consulting, working out of that tiny office with a space heater that smelled faintly of burnt dust and a folding table I bought secondhand for $40. Year 2, I hired my first employee, a recent UVM grad named Priya Nair, and landed a $180,000 contract with a regional furniture distributor that I still consider the account that saved the company. I kept a manila folder. I still have it. It's grown into 3 binders now, organized by year with tab dividers, of every dismissive text, every returned card, every "we'll talk when you've cooled off" message my family sent, because somewhere in me I knew I'd need the record someday, even if just for myself. By 2018, Northgate had 11 employees and $2.1 million in annual revenue, and I moved into a real office suite on Maple Street with actual heating. By 2022, we'd grown to 64 employees and $9.2 million, and a trade write-up in the Burlington Business Journal called me one of Vermont's most understated logistics tech success stories. Caleb, meanwhile, was thriving, on a roll every year, varsity soccer, captain his senior year of high school, and in the fall of 2021, admitted to Ashford University in Boston on partial merit aid, with the rest funded by loans I intended to pay off myself, quietly, without making it a thing between us. The cold contact came in June of 2017. A text from my mother reading, "Your father needs bypass surgery. $12,000. Call me." 4 years of silence, and that was the first sentence. I paid a portion toward his hospital bill, $4,000, sent directly to the hospital, not to her, and got a 1-line received in response. Nothing more for another 5 years. Then, in February of 2024, my cousin Marla forwarded me a screenshot from the family group chat, the one I'd been removed from over a decade earlier, apparently recreated in 2020 with new members added by mistake, Marla among them. In it, my mother had written at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, "Did you see the article in the Burlington Business Journal about Elena's company? $9.2 million. She could easily help with Caleb's tuition at that Boston school. And honestly, she owes this family for the years we supported her." Renee had replied with 3 laughing emojis, and "she'll say no just to spite us, watch." Derek, still in that chat somehow, hadn't replied at all. But I noticed, from the read receipts Marla also captured, that he'd opened it at 11:02 p.m. the same night and forwarded it to Paige for minutes later. I sat with that message for 2 days, reading it over coffee. I let go cold twice before I called my attorney, Sandra Kim, who I'd worked with on Northgate's incorporation back in 2013. Her office on Church Street still had the same worn leather chairs I remembered from signing my very first lease paperwork. I told her I wanted to fund Caleb's remaining tuition myself, but I wanted it structured so no one else could touch it, claim credit for it, or use it as leverage. Not Derek's household, not my parents, not Renee. Sandra helped me set up an anonymous merit scholarship through Ashford University's financial aid office, funded through a trust in Northgate's name, $54,000 covering Caleb's junior and senior years in full. The university knew the source. Caleb did not. Derek did not. Nobody did except Sandra, Harriet, and me. Caleb's graduation was May 17th, 2025, 10 a.m., at Ashford's Founders Quad, the kind of bright, cold New England morning where the light comes in sideways across rows of folding chairs and everyone's breath still fogs a little before the sun burns it off. There were maybe 600 families there. The smell of fresh-cut grass and someone's coffee thermos 2 seats over, a brass band warming up somewhere behind the stage. Derek and Paige sat 2 rows ahead of me, Paige in a cream-colored dress with her sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She kept glancing back like she was expecting me to make a scene, which told me she'd built a whole story about who I was without ever once actually meeting me. My parents came too, invited by Caleb, not by me, and sat several rows back, closer to Renee, who'd driven up from Montpelier alone that morning. The dean, Dr. Marion Castellano, stood at the podium partway through the ceremony, right around 11:40 a.m., to announce the recipients of merit distinctions, and then said she wanted to take a moment before the diplomas began to recognize a donor. This year's Founders Promise Scholarship, which has covered full tuition for 2 graduating seniors, including today's honoree Caleb Whitfield, was established and funded by Ms. Elena Vance, CEO of Northgate Software Solutions, in recognition of first-generation students balancing family responsibility with academic excellence. She asked me to stand. I did, smoothing my coat, aware of a few hundred strangers' eyes moving toward me for a half second before returning politely to the stage. I watched Paige's face go from mild confusion to something close to panic as she turned to look at me over her shoulder, and I watched Derek's jaw actually drop before he caught himself and reset it into something more composed. Caleb found me before anyone else did, still in his cap and gown, and just said, "Mom," quietly, like he was recalculating something about the last 4 years. I told him I'd explain everything later, and I did, that night, over diner pancakes at 11 p.m. the way we used to when he was small. Afterward, in the reception tent, Derek found me near the coffee station, holding 2 paper cups he'd clearly forgotten to hand one of to Paige. "You funded his tuition and didn't tell me? Didn't tell any of us." His voice had an edge of real hurt in it, not performance. For 1 second, I saw something like the man I married, the one who used to sit up with Caleb during croup at 3 a.m. 20 years ago. Then Paige arrived at his elbow, her expression tightening, and the softness left his face. "It's a little theatrical, don't you think, Elena, making it public like this," he said. I opened my bag and handed him a single folded page, not dramatic, just factual. The trust documentation with the disbursement date and Sandra's letterhead. "I didn't make it public," I said. "The university did that because that's how they thank donors. I didn't do this for applause. I did it because Caleb worked for it and I could." My mother, a few feet away near the dessert table, had gone very quiet, her plate of lemon cake untouched. The consequences that followed weren't ones I engineered. Renee's boutique closed permanently in August of 2025. The storefront sitting empty on Main Street in Montpelier for the rest of the year. The debt had simply outlived the store, exactly as I'd predicted 12 years earlier, down to nearly the same figure I'd flagged in her books back in 2013. Derek and Paige's marriage strained visibly after that graduation, under a resentment that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what my success made suddenly, publicly visible about choices they both made along the way. If any part of this is hitting close to home for you, go ahead and drop a comment. I promise you're not the only one watching who's lived some version of it. My mother, though, called me in September, a Tuesday evening, no ask attached this time, no dollar figure anywhere in the conversation, just to say she'd been wrong about the loan, wrong about the years of silence, wrong about a lot of things she'd apparently had time to sit with. She said she'd like to know her grandson better before more time passed, and that she understood if I wasn't ready to let her back in fully. I'm not yet. But we've had coffee twice since then, both times at a diner exactly halfway between Camden and my office, and both times she paid. I haven't decided what that means long term. I've just left the door unlocked. Here's what I actually believe, after all of it. Dignity isn't something other people hand you or take away, no matter how loudly they slam a door or how quietly they close a group chat. It's something you build, one unglamorous year at a time, in a 400 square foot office nobody's watching, until the day it speaks for itself, louder and steadier than any apology ever could. I didn't win anything at that graduation. I just finally let the truth stand where everyone could see it. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me which part hit hardest, and share it with someone who needs to hear that walking away from people who diminish you isn't betrayal. It's the first invoice you ever learn to pay yourself. I'll see you in the next one.